Hi, this is Bill Kearns from Blue Kernel IT. Here I have my ASP.NET application. This was the first application. The first version was actually written back in September before I had worked on a few different contracts. Originally I had the data source and did some .NET Nuke testing and worked with dynamic data in this project. Right now this has been refactored and these two projects aren't being utilized. And additionally, I'm reusing my test serializer library I use in every project, so I have that imported into this one. So here's my ASP.NET client application. I have a master page, site.master, which is the out-of-the-box template, and then several of my ASPX files, my default ASPX. I have login functionality. The login functionality uses stored procedures and consults the values from the student entity or the teacher entity. I'm doing it through a stored procedure validate teacher or validate user. So beyond that, I have pretest. Once the user would log in, I have pretest here. And this is where I make sure I have a data source in my session and a serializer in my session. If not, I new them up. Data source gets connection string, serializer gets default arguments. Here I'm using the serializer's transform method, so I transform the original document, which I get from the web service. I have a copy of the web service in this ASP.NET web application. So I retrieve the test from the database and transform it into xhtml. Here I've implemented the delegate that I have to return an iPageable. I have class pager that extends iPageable, or implements iPageable. I have a couple events, toggle forward and toggle backward, and these basically return HTML strings. So in pretest, the test is loaded and it turns into a pageable, and then I redirect to start test. And here in start test, in the start test page, I have the user control testbar.ascx. I wrote this as a user control so it could be reused also. It has a button backward, button forward, and a button save. It also has a JavaScript timer and uses some of the Ajax control toolkit. So this pager simply, or the test bar simply pages through the string array results returned by pager, and then in start test subscribes to the events, and on the event being clicked retrieves the pager from the session variable pager, casts it into a pager. First it makes sure it saves the test answers. So here on the save answer, I look at the HTTP header collection, the form collection. This is where I'm using all of the question IDs that are returned from the browser. So part of the transform functionality, the thing is, the transform doesn't send everything from the data set. That's part of the functionality from the transform that I wanted to highlight. And this is because you wouldn't want all of your corporate side data set to hit every browser client. There might be a tech-savvy student who would realize they could look at the HTML representation to see which answer is correct. Well, that can't happen because the main purpose of this function, or this transform, is to renumber the questions. So here I leave the question. I use the attribute ID. That way it's picked up by the HTTP 1.1 form key collection, and then dynamically number each question and each answer, so that in start test, every time you click forward or back, it calls the save questions, and then in the data source, in the database, you would have results something like this. where you select from incomplete tests the foreign key relations, and then you'd get this string is what's saved and read each time. So the stored procedure that works with this was rather lengthy, but I wanted to point it out. It demos a cursor and just really a lot of stored procedure writing where you pivot one value that's stored from a column into multiple values. So that stored procedure is here. This is the, if you notice, academic test demo, add to current test. So every time a user clicks forward or backward in the web client, this procedure is called with the values retrieved from the header collection of the request header. And it uses a cursor and makes sure that all the values stored are accurate, complete, not duplicated, etc. But that way, if the browser would crash during a test or during viewing, it's very important that the working state of the entire end-tier application, this is the state each time the user uses that control bar. You want to save what they're working on. So I incorporated that. So after I save, I call my pager. I call move forward, which selects new string arrays and then aggregates them so that it's actually an optional configuration value as to how many questions are on each page. Right now I have it set to 2. It could be any amount, which returns a string, and then I have this static extension method, replace entity references for HTML tags. This is where you actually replace the %LT or %GT with a bracket. That way the string returned is valid HTML. And you can extend whatever's in your XML dataset with HTML to be used by any client. So I think that covers the brunt of the ASP.NET pieces of functionality that I utilized ASP.NET for. Beyond that, there's the iPost back event handler, which really every ASPX page has a process request, which you can override. And this is where you look at the request that was sent in, and you could route a response or just call the base.process request for the default ASPX page functionality. So that's about it for this ASP.NET video. Thanks for your time. This is Bill Kearns from Blue Kernel. Take care.